Well, the question I always come back to is, what is the world that we really want to live in? And are we willing to work for it? Now, I always said, yes, I do. And I got some ideas. And all the people have done the same thing. And we have come to the conclusion that there is enough people that we really don't even have to try to dwell on to what is the cost of a polluted Mississippi. We already know it's something unbearable, unaffordable, and is very sustainably avoidable. As long as we know that, we can win. We don't need the statisticians and the mathematicians and all of those folks to actually write down the formulas so we can fully understand the whole thing before we do something about it. So that's our principle. And then the other big thing is do no harm. If everything we do harms nothing, we'll be okay as a general matter of principle. And that principle came out quite a while ago because it does, it does align with this sort of thing. Finally, what I feel is, here's another, and this is more back in my own background. Growing up, we endure a lot of physical pain. I mean, I got a scar almost in every part of my body. So, thing is, we learned very early on that the physical pain, it's manageable. You can train your mind, you can do all kinds of things, so you can just knock yourself out and you stop feeling it. Some people get drunk, so on and so forth it goes. Seriously, a lot of alcoholism is related to physical pain. And then some alcoholic behaviors are developed. A drug, for example, the Mayans, the Incas used cocoa leaves to deal with pain. All kinds of things like that we have done because of body pain, right? But there is something else, and this is where a lot of us need to start digging deeper, is the spiritual pain has no remedy, has no aspirin for it, no Advil, none of those things helps. The only thing that helps the spiritual pain is your actions. So what you do with food is even more, because food and the spirit are both in the same. One feeds the body so the spirit can be. Now, you can call it whatever you want, the fact that I'm saying this, but if you go back to what works, that's why it works, because people have been able to connect it. That's why the Native American traditions are so powerful. And that's why we ridicule them, because when we go back there, we will not stand for food that is delivered to us on the backs of migrant workers, because that hurts the spirit. And there is no medicine to get rid of that pain, and it doesn't matter how long it takes, it will come back to you because you can't get rid of it. So you see, if nothing else, let's do it for our own benefit. But we have to do this. I don't think we have a choice. The consequences of not making this, not raising your hand and saying, I'll do something and show me, or I got an idea, are really devastating. And we are now starting to realize it. For whatever you want to make out of it, nature is starting to show us as well. So either way, whether we get beat by it, with a stick, or we learn it on our own, but we will have no doubt about it. That was part of the language we inserted in her speech. So, not literally, but we have had about 5 meetings with her down there, especially one in Rochester with not the previous, but the previous Democratic Convention. And we had an opportunity to actually sit with her with a whole group of us, restaurant owners and farmers and all that. And we did address the issue of the lack of those, a lot of the bridges that could serve us minorities are actually broken. They are not passable. The only ones that are well paved are those that are kept for the big corporations and all that. For example, processing facilities. There are no processing facilities that we can access right now. The only ones that are big and processing 1.6 million chickens a week is Gineos, Tyson, and all those places right there in front of us, but inaccessible to us. The small ones that can serve us are so tiny that we just ourselves can overwhelm them very quickly. There is no way to grow into that. So we need to replace some of that infrastructure, because that's key to that distribution process. Then obviously comes freezing, distribution, equipment, and on and on. Some of it exists in the Twin Cities. There's the co-op project, for example, with colleague Radek. He is the son of one of the Southern Federation cooperatives. The Southern Federation of Cooperatives one of the founders. He's the son of one of them, and he understands a lot of this larger scale infrastructure development and so on. But Senator Torres has been receptive. So far, we haven't been able to do much. I mean, you know how government works. It's not, I think we can do more as citizens, but we still need to keep them in the loop, and I know eventually they can do something to push us over the edge, so to speak.
So take a simple, I mean, not simple, but specific example. So there's not enough processing, so that's actually a building where you can take the chicken from live to have it ready for meat.
Or the garlic to be packaged,
right.
Or the beans to be packaged. Lots of infrastructure, poultry being the biggest.
So it's been a long time since I've actually, but it was interesting where I grew up in, you know, about just an hour north of here, there were local, what we call them is the meat market, where there was, for us as, you know, smaller farmers that would actually do the processing, the freezing, and storage right on site. So that doesn't no longer exist.
Oh yeah.
At a small level where.
No, it's just the two different worlds.
Right.
The chicken that comes here to this store has to be processed in an inspected facility.
Right.
Those meat markets are not inspected facilities. So you can take your own cow or whatever you want, and they will process it, and you take it home, and they can store it, and you can eat it, but as long as you are not selling it.
Right.
So you see, it's structural conditioning, as long as you don't sell it. Why? Because the minute you start selling it, you compete with the market. And if you're going to compete with the market, then it gets into the other layers of complexity, as we understand. So control and ownership of the actual infrastructure is the part we need to change. We need to bring it back to where it actually belongs, you know.
What about like the farmer co-ops and the elevator system in terms of that cooperative that would, you know, be a model?
It is a model, and it is something we can use as a way to create an alternative elevator system if that's what we want to pursue. The bottom line is that the current elevators are just conventional corporations from the standpoint of what they process. No different than the meat processor in Fairville, for example. We went to most of the elevators in our area and asked them to source and process, you know, even if it was transitional organic, or at least grain that wasn't treated with chemicals. And they shut you out really quickly, most of them. Eventually you found one fellow that really understands this. Maybe he has a small farm and also works at the elevator, which is the case in Castle Rock. And they started helping us a little bit, but sort of do it on the edges, because somebody else can get upset about this because there is so-and-so farmer and so-and-so farmer who are, you know, bringing in the Monsanto and Syngenta and Seneca seeds into the elevator, and they don't want any whatever out there showing up. And you know, that's the way they talk to us. Once when I asked about organic feed, and the elevator said, "What's that shit?" You know, just right in your face. What's that shit you're talking about? So it's a real issue here. I mean, we are the ones who encounter those issues. We are the ones trying to design the systems around it, but it isn't that easy. We really have to build our own infrastructure up to a point. And then when we meet people like colleagues who understand the Twin Cities-based infrastructure, there's a lot of infrastructure here, Co-op Partners Warehouse, the food co-ops. I mean, places like this that are, don't mind the $250 a pound price for a chicken that they can sell. All of those things, this is in place. But again, you got this huge piece over here, marketplace-based, and then you have these very thin veins that flow into our side, which is getting stronger, but that piece in the middle we were talking about, and Patricia mentioned, it's huge, and it isn't going to be sold by, $100,000 investments. That's where we need the bigger thinking to come in. We need to create the prototypes, the examples on how it's going to be built, just like we did with the poultry units. But eventually, that's not the end goal either. The end goal is really to replace some good funnels that can allow us all to have access to food that is processed efficiently. So.
Well, and I think there's another issue too, is some of the infrastructure is just redundant and doesn't need to be there. As you talked about skipping the breaking down of grains. So again, if you think about farming and then milling, grinding, mixing, and then feeding the chickens, when in fact you could go right to whole grains and bypass all of that infrastructure. That's actually redundant and doesn't need to be there in a different system.
Yes, but when you start designing that system, you still need mixers, and you still need silos, and all of that infrastructure right now is either in the ownership of conventional farmers who bring their huge crops and just fill them up. They don't want any of our products in there. So again, even at that level, and we built some of that already.
Right.
And we are doing this because we, in a tiny way, we created a prototype. Now we are thinking, okay, where can we place this agripreneur incubator, where we can actually set up, a 50,000 bushel corn silo and another one for soybeans and all that. Because remember, soybeans are poisonous in their natural form, not if you sprout them. And then you skip the whole extruding and the whole process, and they got even more energy because you don't remove the oil. So anyway, all of these things are really critical. It's not that it's complicated, but it is important that we understand it at this scale that needs to be thought through for it to actually represent a solution. We putz around too much in this food and ag thing. We need to stop some of it, and we need to continue to bring up the folks who are actually looking at the big picture, because that's what we're missing the boat right now. Back in Guatemala, we were very frustrated, and even now I sometimes get frustrated with our own team because of the nature of our differences, cultural and otherwise. But my big thing is, when I was in ag school, we were heavily involved in supporting the rebel army, because we were in the middle of one of the major routes in the south part of the country. So our school had a lot of support from international organizations with medicines and all kinds of things. So we will sneak in and we'll prepare packages so that the folks will pick up to treat. And in fact, I heard later that the soldiers actually that the rebels captured got better treatment than the rebels themselves. And a lot of those soldiers actually ended up in Minneapolis. I met some of them when I came here. And everybody in Guatemala thought, the army in Guatemala had accused the rebels of just shooting them on the spot, but they never found mass graves or anything of soldiers. So later on, I come and find some of those shot soldiers walking around here happily, and a lot of them in Mexico, because they were given safe passages through the Tacaná volcano and all that region, and we were in the middle. So here we are in high school. Okay, I'm 19 years old, and we're really risking it all the way through to do these things and making a difference and really building this capacity to organize and to defend yourself and to walk thin lines. And one of the important things of that was that we used to call it the bison strategy backwards. They do actually go outwards to protect their young and all of that. So we used to have this thing where we would, we had these circles, and it was like nucleuses. I don't want to call them cells because then it sounds like something else. But we would really work together, and we continued to do that for a long time. And that's the culture that I came from. Really like this very trusting situations where it doesn't matter what happens. You know where this other person stands, and you move along like that. And then came the United States and continued to heavily fund the army that was trying to kill us and everybody else who got in their way. And so in the process of growing into this, I came in touch with organizations in Minneapolis and Iowa and other places. And the frustration for me was that even though everybody was being fed crap through the media here, people still followed it and still behaved and absorbed it as if that was the truth. Today, in the food system, what you just said and what is being fed to us is the same thing. We're being fed all of this stuff very well manicured and pedicured and organized and all of that, and most people actually believe it. And they also elect representatives to the government accordingly. And then we continue to perpetuate this cycle that has no end. And for me, that's one of the most frustrating things of trying to do this work in this country, is the fact that most people are not getting it. And then we move inwards to this 2-3% that is here and that we are meeting with, And that's in 2007. I had this incredible feeling inside that said, you know what? This is changing, and this country may actually go in the other direction. So here's the point of all of that. If we go the other way, I believe that the same forces that keep us going that way, if we can reverse that and reverse the strategy and go in this direction, there will be a point here, if it's only taken 4 or 5 years since we started this, and we have seen tremendous changes. I can only imagine what can happen between now and the next 10 years. And guess what? When the larger population is ready for something different, who's got the answer? We may not have all the answers, but in this frustration and all of this hope and mixed feelings and all of that, one thing we can say, we got an idea. All you need to do is support it.